In the fall of 1867, in a quiet factory town deep in Massachusetts, something happened that changed how people there thought about life and death. A 10-year-old boy named Oliver Blackthorne began showing strange abilities that went far beyond the usual curiosity of a child. Oliver didn't just say he could talk to the dead, he shared exact details that only the deceased could have known, revealing secrets buried with them long ago. But that September, Oliver made a prediction that shook his entire family. He described, with chilling accuracy, how and when his own father would die, including the date, the situation, and even his father's last words. This account was carefully documented in the Blackthorne family's private papers, locked away for over 150 years. It tells the story of a child whose mysterious gift became both a bridge to the unknown and a curse that followed his bloodline. To truly understand Oliver's case, we have to go back to America in 1867. The country was still recovering from the Civil War, which had ended only 2 years earlier. Death had touched nearly every household, leaving grief and emptiness everywhere. The spiritualist movement was spreading fast, offering people hope of reconnecting with lost loved ones. Families across the nation longed for some sign from sons, husbands, and fathers who never came home from the battlefield. The town of Millbrook, Massachusetts, where Oliver lived, was one such place marked by sorrow. With a population of around 1,000, it had sent about 100 men to war. Only 62 returned. In this atmosphere of loss, Oliver was born on October 15, 1857, the son of Cornelius Blackthorne, a sawmill owner, and Eleanora Blackthorne, a deeply religious woman drawn to unexplained phenomena. The family lived in a sturdy 2-story house on Main Street, a reflection of Cornelius's modest success. His lumber business had grown after the war, earning them respect in the community. Yet it soon became clear that young Oliver was not like other children. In her diary, Eleanora recorded the first strange signs. By the age of 4, Oliver was saying unsettling things about guests who visited their home, comments about their past that he couldn't possibly know. During one visit, he told an elderly woman named Mrs. Morrison that her late husband wanted her to know he hadn't died in pain. No one had ever discussed the man's death in Oliver's presence. At first, his family thought it was just a clever imagination. Oliver was a bright child, reading by age 5 and understanding ideas far beyond his years. But as these incidents grew more frequent and precise, the family could no longer explain them away. Oliver began to share information about townspeople who had passed, giving details so specific that grieving families were both comforted and unsettled. He knew about secret hiding places for valuables, whispered last words, and even family truths that living relatives didn't know. Concerned, the family called Dr. Nathaniel Whitmore, the town's physician, when Oliver turned 6. A Harvard-educated man of science, Dr. Whitmore approached the case with skepticism. His notes show how disbelief slowly turned into uneasy fascination. Physically, Oliver seemed perfectly healthy, alert, responsive, and normal for his age. Then something unexpected happened during the exam. Oliver froze in place, his eyes glazed over as if in a trance. Dr. Whitmore compared the look to a patient under anesthesia, yet the boy remained fully conscious. When Oliver spoke again, his voice had changed, lower, slower, and deliberate. He began addressing the doctor directly, mentioning a former patient named Marcus Henderson, a young soldier who had died from infection after a leg amputation. Oliver described Marcus's final moments with incredible detail, things only Marcus and the doctor could have known. Then he relayed a message from the soldier, revealing that a hidden farewell letter was sewn into the lining of Marcus's military jacket stored in his family's attic. When Dr. Whitmore later checked, the letter was exactly where Oliver said it would be. From that day on, similar events occurred more often. Oliver continued revealing information about those who had died, things no one living could possibly know. Word of his unusual abilities began to spread beyond Millbrook, reaching nearby towns across New England. As word of Oliver's abilities spread, grieving families began quietly traveling to Millbrook, hoping for a final message from their departed loved ones. At first, Cornelius Blackthorne tried to stop these visits. A respected businessman and church member, he feared that rumors of supernatural happenings could harm both his reputation and his lumber business. But soon, the events surrounding Oliver became too powerful to ignore. The turning point came in autumn of 1864, when Oliver was just 7 years old. The Prescott family, who had lost 2 sons in the Civil War, Jonathan, killed at Gettysburg, and Samuel, who died of illness in a Virginia hospital, came to the Blackthorne home. Mrs. Elizabeth Prescott, desperate for closure, had heard whispers of Oliver's gift and wanted to know if her boys were at peace. During their visit, Oliver slipped into what witnesses would later call his communication state, a light trance where his voice and manner completely changed. Speaking in a tone that Mrs. Prescott instantly recognized as Jonathan's, he shared deeply personal messages that only her son could have known. Then came something even more remarkable. Oliver began describing, in precise medical detail, the hospital where Samuel had passed away. He named fellow patients, described the doctors and nurses, and even recalled exact conversations Samuel had in his final days. Finally, Oliver revealed that Samuel had kept a hidden diary during his service, one the family had never heard of. Following his directions, the diary was found exactly where he said it would be, confirming every word from the session. News of this encounter spread quickly. Soon, Oliver was known throughout New England as a true medium. Families began traveling great distances to see him, often journeying for days just to spend a few moments in his presence. Dr. Nathaniel Whitmore, still fascinated by the case, started formally recording each session. His notes showed a consistent pattern. Oliver shared accurate, verifiable information about the deceased, details no living person could have known. Between 1864 and 1866, over 80 sessions were documented, each one reinforcing belief in Oliver's extraordinary gift. But Oliver's messages weren't just comforting. He also revealed the locations of lost possessions, solved family disputes by conveying the wishes of the departed, and helped people find closure in ways no one else could. Then, in 1866, something new began. Through his communications, Oliver started predicting future events. The first recorded case involved a local merchant's widow. During a session, her late husband warned her, through Oliver, that a fire would break out in their warehouse within 3 days, and even explained how to stop it. Thanks to these warnings, the fire was prevented. More predictions followed. Oliver began sharing messages about upcoming accidents, illnesses, and even storms, always with striking accuracy. Word of these revelations spread beyond Millbrook, attracting the attention of scholars, doctors, and government officials curious about the young boy who could speak with the dead and see the future. In the summer of 1867, the Blackthorne home received a mysterious visitor. Late one evening, an elegant carriage stopped outside their door. A woman, dressed in full mourning black, stepped out and introduced herself only as a lady from Washington. She said her husband had died while serving the country. During her session, Oliver began channeling a prominent political leader who claimed he had been assassinated while in office. The communication was filled with emotion, offering messages of love and comfort that brought tears to everyone in the room. When it ended, the woman left behind a small gold brooch engraved with the initials L, along with a sealed letter. The note was addressed to the Blackthorne family, with instructions to open it only if something ever happened to Oliver. After that visit, a subtle change came over the boy. He seemed constantly tense, as though burdened by voices and visions he could no longer control. Dr. Whitmore noticed that Oliver's eyes had taken on a tired, aged look far beyond his years. Oliver began speaking about voices that wouldn't stop, about people who wanted to talk all the time, as if the spiritual world was always pressing in on him. It was in this fragile state that, in September 1867, Oliver made the prediction that would forever alter the Blackthorne family's fate. The session that night had been requested by the Turner family, who wanted to contact their son killed in the war. It was a cold September evening, and the first autumn chill was already creeping through the windows of the Blackthorne living room, where history would soon be made. That September night, as the Turner family sat in the Blackthorne living room, Oliver entered a trance deeper than anything Eleonora had ever seen before. For several long minutes, he remained completely still, his face blank, as though he were listening to distant voices only he could hear. When Oliver finally spoke, he began by sharing gentle, comforting words from young Turner to his grieving parents. But as the session drew to a close, something entirely unexpected happened. Instead of waking as usual, Oliver's face shifted, his expression filled with sorrow. Then he spoke again, but this time Eleanora froze. The voice coming from her son was not his own. It was the familiar voice of Ezekiel Blackthorne, Cornelius's late father. Through Oliver, Ezekiel delivered a message that filled the room with silent dread. Cornelius would die in exactly 3 weeks and 2 days. His death would not come from illness or accident, but from the shock of a devastating revelation he would receive in a letter on that day. The Spirit described every detail, the time, the setting, and even Cornelius's final words. He would be found in his library at 2:15 p.m., clutching the letter that brought the fatal news. His last message would be for Eleanora, telling her to protect Oliver because the world isn't ready for what he can see. When Oliver came out of the trance, he broke down in uncontrollable tears. It was clear he understood the gravity of what he had said. The room fell silent, no one dared speak. The prophecy was so precise, so detailed, that it couldn't be brushed aside as coincidence. In the days that followed, a heavy tension settled over the Blackthorne home. Cornelius, a practical and steady man, didn't know how to respond to a prophecy of his own death. Eleanora's diary from that time describes her husband's growing unease. Some days he forced himself to act normal, other times he withdrew completely, lost in thought, quietly counting the days. Oliver, meanwhile, seemed weighed down by guilt and fear. Dr. Whitmore, who visited more often now, noted that the boy looked exhausted and thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. Many nights, Oliver stayed awake until dawn, staring through his window at the stars. He spoke occasionally about needing to make preparations, but when asked what he meant, he offered no explanation. Dr. Whitmore tried to view the situation through a medical lens. Perhaps, he thought, Oliver's strange predictions were symptoms of emotional strain, the toll of his own unsettling abilities. But even he couldn't ignore how eerily specific the prophecy had been. 2 weeks later, things began happening that made the family feel as though fate itself was closing in. Cornelius received a letter from a Boston attorney, asking for information about old business matters long thought resolved. The lawyer mentioned that certain documents had recently been uncovered during an office renovation, papers that might affect the family's financial interests. After reading the letter, Cornelius seemed deeply troubled. He refused to share details, but Eleanora could tell that something about its contents had shaken him. By the 3rd week, the tension in the house had become unbearable. Oliver spent most of his days silently watching from the windows, his gaze fixed on something unseen. When asked what he was looking for, he simply said he was waiting. Dr. Whitmore observed that the boy appeared to be aging rapidly, his face and eyes reflecting experiences far beyond his 10 years. Then, on the morning of October 12, 1867, exactly 3 weeks and 2 days after the prophecy, the long-dreaded moment arrived. The mailman delivered a registered envelope addressed to Cornelius Blackthorne. The seal bore the name of a Boston law firm, suggesting the matter was official and serious. As the letter was handed over, Oliver, sitting at the breakfast table, grew visibly tense. He looked at the envelope, then at his father, with a sorrow far too heavy for a child. Cornelius took the letter and quietly went to his library to read it in private. Eleanora noted in her diary that it was 9:45 a.m. when he closed the door behind him. The contents of that letter would remain a mystery for decades. Later discovered records revealed it contained evidence of corrupt dealings involving Cornelius's late father, actions that, if exposed, would destroy the family's good name. Even worse, the letter warned that proof was being gathered for a legal case unless the family paid a large sum to keep the matter quiet. Eleanora stayed in the living room, trying to appear calm as she waited. Oliver, seated beside her, said nothing. From time to time, he glanced at the clock, as if counting down to an inevitable hour. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Eleanora's worry began to grow. Her husband had not yet returned from the library. Cornelius Blackthorne had remained in his library for over 4 hours, unresponsive to Eleanora's calls. Concern grew with every passing minute. Then, at 2:10 in the afternoon, Oliver suddenly stood up from his chair. He walked to the library door and stood motionless, his head tilted slightly, as if he were hearing something no one else could. At exactly 2:15 p.m., Oliver turned toward his mother. His face was pale, his voice calm but heavy with sorrow. "Now," he said. Eleanor rushed to the door and found it locked. When repeated knocks brought no answer, she cried out for help. Neighbors forced the door open, and what they found inside would haunt the family forever. Cornelius sat lifeless in his leather chair, the letter still clutched in his hands. His face was frozen in a look of pure shock, as though he had read something too painful to comprehend. Dr. Whitmore, summoned immediately, confirmed that Cornelius had died of heart failure. There were no signs of foul play, only the trauma of confronting something that had utterly broken his spirit. On the desk lay a single sheet of paper, written in shaky handwriting. "Eleonora, take care of our son. The world isn't ready for what he can see." They were the exact words Oliver had predicted 3 weeks earlier. The stunning accuracy of the prophecy left no room for doubt. News spread quickly across New England, and within days, newspapers in Boston and New York were reporting on the mysterious boy whose visions had foretold his father's death. Oliver became a national sensation, but fame brought more danger than comfort. Religious leaders accused him of being under dark influence, claiming his powers came from evil forces. Skeptics dismissed him as a fraud. And worse still, opportunists began circling, eager to profit from his gift. Heartbroken and frightened, Eleonora decided to protect her son in the only way she could think of. She arranged for a formal portrait of Oliver, hoping to preserve his image in case something happened to him. The photographer, Jeremiah Hartwell, was known for his quiet professionalism. On a gray November morning, he arrived at the Blackthorne home with his equipment. The session seemed ordinary enough. Oliver sat still, gazing at the camera, while Eleonora watched silently from across the room. But when Hartwell developed the photograph later that day, he froze. The image showed Oliver seated as expected, but faint translucent figures appeared behind him, shapes of people in clothing from different time periods. Among them was one face unmistakably resembling Cornelius Blackthorne. Even more unsettling, in the photo, Oliver appeared to be looking directly at these ghostly figures, though during the sitting he had never taken his eyes off the camera. Assuming he had made a mistake, Hartwell repeated the process twice with different equipment. Each time, the results were the same: Oliver surrounded by invisible presences, captured only by the camera's lens. When Eleonora saw the photos, she felt both awe and fear. They were undeniable proof of what she had long suspected, that Oliver existed between two worlds, living and dead. Terrified of what such evidence could bring, she destroyed 2 of the photographs and hid the third in a secret place, swearing that no one would ever see it while her son lived. But despite her efforts, pressure on the family continued to grow. University scholars offered large sums to study Oliver in laboratory conditions. Religious officials demanded that the boy be examined by the church. And soon, government agents began visiting Millbrook quietly, suggesting that Oliver's abilities might pose a national security concern. Eleonora realized she was losing control. The outside world was closing in, and she could no longer shield her son from it. Then, one cold December night in 1867, Oliver came to her with a calm, haunting seriousness. He said he could no longer bear it. The voices of the dead had become constant, their demands never-ending. They spoke day and night, leaving him no peace. He told his mother that his very presence was beginning to distort reality, that people around him were starting to hear whispers and see things that weren't there. It was as if his abilities were spreading, a kind of spiritual contagion touching everyone close to him. Finally, he revealed that the spirits had given him instructions, a way to close the door that had been opened through his gift. But doing so, he warned, would require him to leave this world forever. Eleonora Blackthorne faced an unbearable decision: to let her son go into the unknown, or to keep him close and watch as his strange gift slowly destroyed him. On the cold morning of December 15, 1867, Oliver Blackthorne vanished. When Eleonora went to his room, the bed was empty. On the pillow lay a single note, written neatly in Oliver's careful hand. "Mother, the dead have called me home. Don't look for me in the world of the living." Despite extensive searches across the region, no sign of the boy was ever found. It was as though Oliver had simply ceased to exist. Yet his story didn't end there. In the decades that followed, scattered reports began to surface, sightings of a solemn young boy who resembled Oliver appearing in distant towns. Witnesses described the same details: a quiet child with knowing eyes, speaking of the dead, bringing comfort or messages, and then disappearing just as mysteriously. Even more unsettling, these appearances often occurred near major tragedies: hospitals during epidemics, battlefields after wars, and towns struck by natural disasters. It was as if Oliver had become a permanent bridge between the living and the dead, emerging whenever the line between both worlds grew thin. Eleonora lived out her remaining years waiting for news that never came. She kept Oliver's photograph hidden, along with her diaries and all of Dr. Whitmore's notes. When she passed away in 1895, she left precise instructions. All records related to Oliver were to remain sealed for 50 years. In 1945, the archives were finally opened. Inside were the full accounts of the Millbrook boy medium, including the infamous photograph. When examined by modern experts, the image revealed anomalies that no known photographic technique could explain. Tests confirmed the ghostly figures behind Oliver were not double exposures or flaws in development. Under special lighting, even more strange details appeared: faint writing in an unknown language, invisible to the naked eye. The Oliver Blackthorne case soon became a subject of debate among historians and researchers. Some argued that Oliver's powers were a rare form of psychic sensitivity, heightened by the overwhelming grief that followed the Civil War. According to this view, the nation's shared trauma might have created conditions where certain minds could access knowledge beyond ordinary human limits. Others suggested Oliver suffered from a rare neurological phenomenon, something like temporal synesthesia, allowing him to perceive the past, present, and future all at once. The most controversial theory proposed that Oliver had become a convergence point between dimensions, enabling direct communication between our physical world and realms normally hidden from human perception. Whatever the truth, Oliver's influence on Millbrook endured. Families who had spoken with him said their experiences changed how they understood death and consciousness. Some even developed their own sensitivities afterward, as though Oliver's gift had left a lasting imprint on the town. 4 years after the disappearance, Dr. Whitmore continued investigating unusual phenomena in Millbrook. His records documented a significant rise in unexplained activity, ghostly voices, strange lights, and dreams shared by multiple witnesses. It seemed as if Oliver's presence had permanently altered the spiritual fabric of the region. The Blackthorne house was eventually sold, but every owner reported similar experiences: faint children's voices in the early morning, the figure of a young boy glimpsed in windows, and a gentle, sorrowful energy filling the rooms. In 1923, the house became a local museum, and visitors often described powerful emotional reactions when standing in Oliver's former bedroom, as though echoes of his life still lingered in the air. Over time, the story of Oliver Blackthorne became a key case for those studying the link between collective trauma, psychic sensitivity, and the unexplained. Modern analyses of Dr. Whitmore's notes have suggested that Oliver might have been an early example of what we now recognize as complex trauma, a child so emotionally open that he absorbed the suffering of an entire generation. Yet even this theory fails to explain the most extraordinary facts: his flawless predictions, his detailed knowledge of strangers long dead, and the photograph that still defies every scientific test. What remains certain is that Oliver Blackthorne stood at the crossroads of the known and the impossible, a living bridge between science and mystery, life and death. His story reminds us that some aspects of human experience lie far beyond current understanding, moments when reality itself bends around those rare individuals sensitive enough to perceive its deeper layers. Today, Oliver's photograph is preserved in the archives of the Massachusetts Historical Society. Each new study reveals more details: subtle marks, hidden symbols, and faint outlines that only deepen the enigma. And perhaps that's how it should be. Some mysteries exist not to be solved, but to remind us that reality is far more complex than we can imagine. Though Oliver Blackthorne vanished more than 150 years ago, his legacy endures, a haunting question that continues to challenge what we believe about consciousness, death, and the unseen boundaries of human experience. If this journey through forgotten history has stirred your curiosity about the unknown, stay connected for more stories drawn from humanity's hidden archives, tales that reveal just how much of our past remains shrouded in mystery. Because some gifts transcend life itself, and some stories, like Oliver's, never truly end.